Hey, everybody. There is a very complicated question for this week's podcast, and I had to make it into a nice, simple question. What do I do when I am not enjoying my anxious child? But this is really, it has more to do with other things like guilt and trying to figure out uh, what to do when we're not enjoying parenthood. And is it our fault if we don't like our child? Is it our child's fault? Who needs to change? All of these things. The first thing I want to say is it is okay to not always like parenting. We can love our children very much and not always like the job of parenting them. And parenting anxious children is especially difficult. When I am working with parents of anxious children, I am not just working with how to parent this particular child. I'm also working with how do I take care of myself as this particular parent. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about how I got started in this work to help you understand where I'm coming from. So before I was a clinical counselor and I was thinking about going to school, what actually sent me to school was my own experience as a parent dealing with secondary infertility, recurrent pregnancy loss, and eventually adoptive parenting. And I was really interested in the way I had to construct my parenting, how I had to shift my idea of who I was as a parent when I was able to create a child from scratch and had to go down this different path of adoptive parenting. And it was just really interesting to me to have this experience and talk to other people having this experience. And that was originally why I went back to school. And in school, I became reminded of how much I like the general idea of becoming the parent you are meant to be, like who you are meant to be, you, and then becoming the parent your child needs. And sometimes those things can be kind of at odds with each other, which gives us opportunity to grow. And then I went on to go through the certification training through Postpartum Support International because I was interested in doing postpartum work, which I absolutely loved. So I went on to get my infant toddler mental health certification, postgraduate, and that has shaped my work with parents of anxious kids because I think many of us do not have opportunity to really dig into this stuff. Now, if you've gone through infertility or pregnancy loss, if you are an adoptive parent, sometimes you have navigated some of this more just because you've had to in the process. But I think every parent benefits from it, which is basically we have this idea of the kind of parent we wanted to be. And very often that we have some high ideals. And then we find out that maybe we're not that parent. Like I thought I would be a much more patient and gracious parent than it turns out I'm capable of being. I didn't know how angry I could be until I had kids. I was surprised to find this primal anger that would come up in me. And I had to learn how to navigate that and accept that about myself and figure out, obviously, it's never okay to visit that primal anger on your kid, but it's okay to have the experience of being that angry, right? And then trying to figure out, does this have something to do with my needs? Does this have something to do with what I need to ask from my child? There's always this balancing act. This especially is strong when you've got anxious kids because their needs don't always align with um, what they want. So they think they need you to do more caretaking than actually is good for them, which means that sometimes we have to do things they don't want because it's what they need. And it's really hard when it comes to anxiety because if they feel like, if you don't do this for me, I'm going to die of fear, it's really hard to say, you're fine, especially if we ourselves wanted to be the kind of parent who was always there for our kid, right? So so that's part of it is we have to deal with the ideal of ourselves we're running up against. And then also the idea of what parenting and our child, what parenting was going to look like and who our child is going to be. So maybe we thought that parenting was going to be more fun than it is. Maybe we thought there'd be more laughter than there is. Maybe we thought we would have a child who would love to fish and they're bored out of their minds when they're fishing. and we find ourselves getting angry with them because they're not enjoying this thing that we loved. And in all of that is also grief about what I thought parenting was going to be, grief about what I thought my child was going to be, grief about who I thought I was going to be. And that's just the parenting part of our life, let alone whatever's going on in our intimate relationships, in our professional careers, in the way we run our household. I mean, it is a lot, which is all to say it is okay to not always like what's happening with your child. And it's really important to confront that and to allow yourself to have those feelings because it's the only way you're going to get past it. Often I'm working with parents who are really, really done in with parenting, especially if they have an incredibly intense and anxious child, the kind of child who acts out a lot. Very often these parents are very stuck in the parenting pitfalls because they are trying so hard to avoid their child's outbursts. These parents say, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells with my child. And then they start to dread their child. They start to dread time with them, or they start to dread bedtime because they know it's going to be a big meltdown, or they dread coming home from work, or they dread their child coming home from school. And because they feel so guilty about it, they end up getting even further stuck in those pitfalls. For example, they want to yell at their child, oh my gosh, can you give me a break? Quit following me around. And they feel so guilty that they have that impulse that they become even further entrenched in the parenting pitfalls. They sort of overcompensate. For those parents, I think getting an objective point of view, getting some eyes on your relationship who can help you see where you're stuck, help you see where you need to set boundaries for your own good and for your child's is really helpful. Even if it's something you know you should do, I know I need to tell my child to quit following me around. Having someone available who will say to you, yes, you're doing the right thing, you're doing a good job, you are a loving parent, and loving parents set limits can make a real difference in your ability to follow through. So if you are struggling in your relationship with your anxious child, if you are struggling with guilt, if you are struggling with grief, if you are struggling, it makes sense to get help that is going to honor your experience and is going to help you help your child grow through their experience. I also wanted to let you know that I have a webinar on how to talk to your anxious child that you can get at my website. It's childanxietysupport.com/webinar, and that webinar is free. You can get it on demand. So feel free to go to my website and sign up for that. And it's going to help you get some language around anxiety, talk about the things that maybe you shouldn't be saying to your child, talk about the things that you should be saying to your child. And I hope that you will check it out and give me some feedback. Let me know if it's a help. Okay, I'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in this week. If you have a question you'd like me to address on the show, please go to childanxietysupport.com/question and you can post it there. Maybe I'll address it on a future episode. And if you'd like to learn more about my program, you can visit childanxietysupport.com. Thanks so much and have a great week.